And welcome to another episode of the Unisolve Question. My very special guest from Chicago today is Nelson Rosario. And, hello, Nelson, first of all.
Hello, Pooh. How are you?
I'm good, thank
Great.
you. Welcome to
Yeah, thanks for
Canada.
having me. Yeah, it looks very similar to Chicago.
Well, if by it you mean Toronto, then yes, but the rest of Canada doesn't think that it looks like Toronto. So yeah, I agree with you that Toronto is like a twin of Chicago. And I just like how this word Chicago rolls off my tongue for several reasons. First of all, there is the word chic in Chicago. And then there is the word go in Chicago. And then Chicago it also rhymes with tango and largo, which represents some sort of luxury, right? So when you say Chicago, you think of something luxurious or I don't know, decadent or hedonistic or something like that. And I want to talk about how I found words that rhyme with Chicago a little bit later because it's related to our common interest in technology. But before that,
Okay.
tell me why you like Chicago so much, because I think you're obsessed with Chicago.
Well, I do love Chicago. It's true, and I there's a variety of reasons. So I've been here for a while now. I didn't grow up here, but Chicago kind of has everything that you would possibly want in a big city, with, I would say, not a lot of the big city baggage. So you may have heard people say that Chicago is a city of neighborhoods. That's very true. So if you visit the city, most people spend their time near the Loop, the downtown area. I'm not far from the Loop myself at the moment. I'm actually up at kind of the boundary of Lincoln Park and Lakeview. My office is about I don't know, a 5-minute walk to the lake. So the city is a lot more than what people see when they just visit, right? If you were in the mood for, any sort of ethnic food, I guarantee there's a neighborhood that has, restaurants and a local population that is now living in Chicago, where you'll get the real thing. And I love the lake. Lake Michigan is right there. I think it's the city's greatest asset. Ever since I've been in Chicago, I've never lived more than probably, I don't know, half a mile from the lake. I live on the far north side of the city. We're still in the city, but I spend a lot of time running and biking along there. In July, you go out along the lake and there's sailboats and all sorts of activity, and you're kind of like, where am I? Is this Los Angeles? What's going on here? I'm not going to be bold enough to think that anybody actually believes Chicago is Los Angeles, but it's a fun thing to say. But also it's a global city, right? This is the third largest financial center in the United States of America, making it one of the largest financial centers in the entire country or in the entire world. And, it's just kind of it's just a no nonsense sensibility here, which professionally I've run into with respect to the types of investments in companies that are made here, the types of companies that actually kind of are born out of the Chicago ecosystem, as opposed to, we're going to cure death, which is something that, would come out of like Silicon Valley, or, we're going to take over the world, which is something that would come out of New York. So I could keep going on and on about Chicago, the great art scene, the great culture, the wonderful people. But my guess is that's not the sole focus of our conversation today. And I do
No,
tweet on
it
Twitter
can be if you
with the
want.
hash.
This is I
I
know
do
how
tweet.
important Chicago is to you.
That's true. I do. Every opportunity I get, anything positive about Chicago, I'll tweet out with the hashtag move to Chicago. In
Yes.
part because we do need more people to move here. But
Toronto and Chicago are like the bizarre versions of each other. Everything you said about Chicago also applies to Toronto. So Toronto
Hmm.
is almost Chicago, or Chicago is almost Toronto, but with some slight imperceptible differences that are also weirdly mathematical. For example, Chicagoans think north south along the lake. We think east west along the lake. Your lake is Lake Michigan, right?
Hmm.
Yes. And
Yeah.
our lake is Lake Ontario. And we also think about how far we live from the lake. I'm always near the lake. I'm not as close as you are, but maybe right now I'm about 30-minute walk from the lake, maybe.
Hmm.
Chicago is really interesting to us, but I know that we are not very interesting to Chicago because that's what Canadians have come to expect from the American cousins. And I want to put in a word about how I thought up that clever quip about Chicago being associated with luxury words like Largo and Tango. So I thought, like, I had this instinct that Chicago was sounded like something luxurious. So I went to
Hmm.
ChatGPT and I just typed in literally words associated with luxury that end in go. And it gave
Ah.
me a list. Yeah, like mango, largo, allegro, tango. So I love
Oh, that's
ChatGPT for
interesting.
that reason.
Hmm.
Anyway, so when I Googled you, you know what it looked like, the search results? The search results looked like you were competing for prominence with a football player. There is a football
Oh,
player
the
has the
former,
exact, yeah, from
yeah,
Jacksonville,
he
right?
played it. Yeah, he played at UCLA. He was a
Yeah.
tight end. Yeah. No, I never played college football. I'm also not six, like 5 and 260 pounds or however big that guy is.
Yeah, but if you look at your Google search results, it's literally like you guys are duking it out for who's going to be at the top of the Google search results. And you know what? So far you've been winning. And because your LinkedIn profile, that's the power of LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile, at least for me, is the top search result for Nelson Rosario. And when you Google Nelson Rosario, when you find you, literally almost the first thing that you see is cryptocurrency, blockchain, and all that other scary stuff. Can you tell me? Can you tell me? And I know that this is a really banal question, but I'm just curious. I think it's a great question. What is cryptocurrency?
I don't know. Do you know?
I actually had
Um,
2 episodes about it where literally my friend interviewed me about cryptocurrency.
yeah, it is a good question. And, I think it depends on what sort of kind of definition you're you're interested in getting, right?
Yeah.
So, for the past 5 years, I've co-taught a law school class called Blockchain, Cryptocurrency, and the Law. And the way that we describe cryptocurrency is that it is a new form of digital property that's secured without a central counterparty. There's a lot more to it than that. Um, but I think that really gets at kind of like the key part of what's new in this industry and space, and what simply didn't exist prior to Bitcoin kind of being released into the wild. And that is, bits, pieces of electronic information having some sort of scarcity as a consequence of participants in a network that don't know or trust each other, right? I mean, we all know how easy it is to copy and paste. I mean, that's the practice of law right there, right? But the idea of scarce kind of digital information it just didn't exist before. And then you layer on the top, kind of like the public-private key infrastructure and how you control cryptocurrency and addresses on a blockchain, and what sort of rights are actually associated with this. And then it gets a little more maybe convoluted. But I think at its base layer, it's unique digital properties secured without the use of a central counterparty.
Well, that's a very legalistic definition. And you know what? I'm not surprised because hello, you're a lawyer, right? But you're also, and I don't think that everybody knows that, but you're also a computer scientist. You're also a computer programmer. You're trained in computer science. So if you wear that hat, what is cryptocurrency?
That's a great question. I never get asked that from that angle. And I do have a degree in computer science.
This is a 5-star show. We are known for asking elite level questions here.
Exactly right. Yeah. No stone will be unturned.
Yeah.
I think it has the potential, and I'm cribbing from Andreas Antonopoulos here, but I do think that cryptocurrency is a value transfer protocol native to the internet. And, when you think about the way that the internet developed and how we became a networked world and everything, there were two really kind of important characteristics about participants in the network that were not really considered. One was identity, right? How do we solve the identity of a sender of information or recipient? And the other was value. How do we exchange value, right? They were solely focused on, how do we build a resilient network to make sure that we can continue to send information, and it obviously exploded from there. And so I think cryptocurrency kind of can step in as that. I don't really like the phrase internet of money, but I do think that it is an appropriate value transfer protocol, right? That is, I don't know if it's purpose built for our world and our kind of, especially the way the world is trending and everything, but it's a pretty good first start, right? Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question directly enough, but a value transfer protocol that kind of anybody can come and go, and you don't need to rely on that, multinational bank or government for it to actually work. That's what I think it is.
Mm-hmm. And when you say value transfer, we all understand information transfer protocols. And well, let's first start with the word protocol. HTTP is a protocol, and this protocol is simply a convention. What is a protocol? It's a convention about commands or some kind of
right.
Tokens that will be exchanged by parties, and the parties agree that these tokens or commands have certain meaning and will result in certain outcomes. So HTTP has very simple vocabulary, get, put, so on and so forth. And it's the foundation of this vast richness that we know as the World Wide Web. A very, 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 very simple protocol called HTTP is really at the foundation of this whole universe that we almost live in now, part-time. And you say that cryptocurrency is also a protocol, and it's a protocol for transfer of value. So HTTP is a protocol for transfer of information that supports World Wide Web. It follows that the information that it supports transfers of is sufficient to generate that richness of www. And when you say that cryptocurrency is a value transfer protocol, is this protocol also sufficient to generate richness on par with the richness and the breadth of www, but for value? And if yes, what is it going to look like down the road? Because, one of the questions that we keep hearing is, show me one application of cryptocurrency
Hmm.
that is not crime, fraud, and so on and so forth. And I remember a friend of ours, and I will not remember which one right now, but I apologize in advance. But he said on Twitter, in response to those queries, yeah, like, tell me one useful application of money in the last several thousand years. So, with sarcasm, basically suggesting that money itself is a sufficient, in and of itself, is a sufficient application of cryptocurrency. What do you think? Is cryptocurrency as the value transfer protocol is it going to generate the same richness as HTTP, or is it just going to be money, or is actually money the next protocol, like, I don't know, like maybe HTML or something like that, on top of which we will see finally the explosion of applications?
That's a great question. I guess in terms of trying to identify a use case, that justifies the existence of this industry or why people should care, I think it's hard to say what that would be. And I think part of that is a function of who I'm talking to at any given moment, because the majority of my conversations are with people that are in like first world countries with extremely developed financial systems. And so they're kind of like, I just don't see the point, right? My credit cards work fine. Yeah, I don't like my bank, but like it gets a job done. I have investments, I have retirement accounts, etc. But I think where it may have the potential to develop that richness, as you put it, is in the developing world. And I've always thought that if cryptocurrency is going to achieve a measure of the success that its kind of like most strident adherents believe it can, it's not going to be driven by activity in the first world, right? It's going to be driven by activity in the developing world where they don't have a full kind of financial infrastructure baggage that we do here. And so I do think that if we start from the position that cryptocurrency is a novel way to transfer value at a distance over the internet without the involvement of a central counterparty, I do think that something extremely rich will be built on top of it. I think it's a coordination technology. I think it has the potential to lower transaction costs consequently. And so coordination technologies enable new human behaviors, and new human behaviors usually take a long time to kind of stick, right? There's if you don't do a lot of like cross-border transactions where it's easier to use USDC as opposed to waiting for the banks to open, because it's the weekend, then, the value of something like crypto is not readily apparent, right? It's kind of, it's abstract, but it's like, I'm not going to use this in my day to day. And it's a legitimate criticism. The white paper came out 15 years ago in Halloween in 2008. And, we haven't seen mass adoption, but at the same time, I don't know that we ever necessarily will, at least for the kind of like money use case of crypto. I could see a future where something like Bitcoin or the market in aggregate functions as some sort of kind of alternate global reserve currency that, you know, human beings, corporations, maybe even some governments hold a certain amount as just kind of a hedge, right? Maybe it's not their primary concern, but it's just kind of there. And I think we're sort of on track for that right now anyway. I mean, it's pretty remarkable that the price of Bitcoin is what? It's like 42, 43, 44,000 or something right now. And that's not much of a news story. You know, I mean, you and I have been around long enough where when Bitcoin first kind of really entered the stratosphere in 2017, it was pandemonium, you know, and people were just kind of like, what is this nonsense, right? And now it's just kind of like, oh, you know, well, what's behind Bitcoin's rally? Like if you watch, you know, the financial news or whatever, and then they just kind of move on, right? So I think that the necessary kind of maybe cultural mind share of like the concept being there enough where it's getting boring may lay the groundwork for really interesting things to happen, which is why I work in the space. I don't know. It's a good question.
Great. I have a trick question for you now. I'm trying good and then bad and trick, and I'm going to alternate. So the trick question is this. When you started your answer, you said you called the financial infrastructure here extremely developed or something to that effect. And then you continued to contrast it with the developing world. And I think your suggestion was that because the developing world's financial infrastructure is not as developed, it will be more open to cryptocurrency. And the trick question is this. So whoever developed the HTTP protocol way back, right? We can all find that RFP online. We can all read it. Everybody, by the way, should Google the HTTP RFP and, if possible, read it. It's really insightful. But let's say they added cryptocurrency transfer value, not crypto, they added value transfer to that protocol from day one as a necessary element of HTTP, not as an add-on, not as a plugin, not as a dependency or whatever, just as a inherent, like get, right? Like get or put. So they say pay. Let's say there is pay in HTTP from day one. Right. Question: do you think the internet, as we know it today, would exist if they did that? Assume that it would work. I assume that they also implemented HTTP and they built something like Bitcoin right away from day one.
No, I don't think it would.
I also think it wouldn't. So when you say the financial infrastructure here is extremely developed, what you really meant is it's extremely entrenched. And it reached a peak. I think the peak of our financial infrastructure was the credit card in the 50s. They invented in the 50s. It's really the peak. It's really it's really a stable coin, the way I think about the credit cards, because what it is, it's just a proprietary network for exchanging IOUs. That's what credit cards are. And it was a genius invention, no doubt about it, because it encapsulated it encapsulated loans, it encapsulated issuing credit, it encapsulated, abstracted it away from vendors, so vendors didn't have to worry about it, and opened up completely new customer segments to vendors who otherwise wouldn't access them because they didn't have an ability to provide financing. It also provided the infrastructure for value transfer by inventing these fake money IOUs that later were settled into bank balances. So that was a genius invention in the 50s, but I think we were stuck there. We're stuck there, and it's a terrible system by modern standards. But someone I know recently traveled to Kazakhstan. And I guess Kazakhstan is not considered to be a part of the Western, highly developed financial infrastructure. So the way they make payments there blew that person's mind, just blew that person completely out of the water. And That person was completely shocked. They live in the 21st century when it comes to payments. They want people to pay. When that person thought back about making payments here in North America, the thought was they don't want us to pay anymore. It's getting so hard to pay, right? It's getting so hard to send money to people. There are so many barriers, AML, KYC, credit checks, delays, so on and so forth. And that person was in Kazakhstan, and the thought was, oh my God, they actually want us here to transact. They actually want us here to do business as much as possible, because super easy to send money to friends, random people, like on messengers, for example. QR codes to make payments. Nothing to do with cryptocurrency. Nothing,
Right.
admittedly, but a completely different philosophy of payments. So what do you think about this? What do you think about the entrenched financial infrastructure? And when we say entrenched, I think it's more fair to say that it's interests that are entrenched rather than technology. Technology doesn't entrench itself. Technology is agnostic to, it doesn't have any interest or wishes or desire to stay or go. So what do you think about the financial system here? And what do you think the future of our financial system here in North America is? And I only want to talk about North America because Canada and the US are very similar, and Europe is actually quite different.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right that it's entrenched. The financial system is extremely entrenched, and it's a consequence of the interests, but it's also a consequence of kind of the financialization of the economy here in North America ever since really the 1980s, right? Now, I don't want to make value judgments one way or the other, but that changes the way the society operates, right? Where there's less of a focus on creation that is not financial in nature, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's not even that I necessarily strongly dislike the financial system. There's a lot of people in crypto that do, right? I kind of, whatever, it's a necessary evil that exists, right? And it has a fascinating history too, when you kind of look back to kind of Renaissance Italy and the invention of, double entry bookkeeping and all of that stuff, and how that has led to, New York being the center of the universe, right? And so, that entrenchment, and I'm not surprised by your friend's experience in Kazakhstan, because, when I first really fell down kind of the Bitcoin rabbit hole, I was reading about people using Bitcoin in sub-Saharan Africa via their like Nokia, not even Nokia flip phones, like the old Nokia brick, right? And it was in part through a company called M-Pesa. And I was just like, this is amazing. Like, they don't have bank branches, they don't have any of this, but they're using Bitcoin. Like, how is this even possible? And it's because there isn't all of that entrenched interest, and there isn't all of that infrastructure that they're kind of competing with. And they're solely kind of in that situation, we're competing with, hey, it's easy to send money from person A to person B, right? Whereas here in North America, there are so many intermediaries and other people that are kind of like offering solutions somewhere along the value chain, but nothing is a fundamental shift, really, and so it's just kind of like, I mean, to use, I guess, maybe a technical term, it sort of ossifies the financial system, right? Because there's all this other stuff built on top of it and top of it and top of it and top of it. And there's no, like, if you and I were like, well, let's reinvent banks in North America, we would would get no money. We would get kicked out of every meeting, and it wouldn't even matter if we had a great idea. Maybe we did have a genius idea of how to reinvent a bank. No one that's a non-starter, and so um, that's part of why I think, well, if something that's so alien like crypto is able to be successful, it can't, at least initially, and not anytime soon, I don't think. It can't compete with that huge leviathan of the financial industry here in North America. It's just not possible.
I think that your hypothetical about starting a bank is a really good illustration of how we do not have a free market in the financial services industry. Because if you try to start a bank today, chances are they will say no. And when I say they, I mean the Federal Reserve or the Bank of Canada. These are the organizations that decide if a bank is to exist or not. And why? So think about starting a business and any other business. You just register a corporation and it's a 5-minute thing, even in Canada. Oh, maybe actually it's easier to start a corporation in Canada than in the US. I just registered corporations a few days ago. It's just like 10 minutes through some wizards online, whatever. But if you want to start a bank, you have to make an application. You have to ask for permission. And then they will look at a bunch of things and they will probably say no, because they don't need new banks. They don't need new banks.
Right.
Why would they need new banks? So that proves that banks don't exist first. They don't exist first for their shareholders' value. They don't exist first for the abstract market. They exist first for the interests of the central bank. They are agents of the central bank and they implement central bank's policy. And if you think about the mechanics of how money actually works, then you understand why. Because commercial banks are responsible for database entries that say how much money you have in your account. So they have to be full trustees of the central banks that actually generate and issue the bank deposit dollars. And if they're not, then they cannot participate in the system. So if you look at the banking system, then from the perspective of the central bank, then your thinking goes, why do we need another bank? It works. I mean, the more banks you have, the more risk we have in the system, because we have to share trust with more people. And the people that are already there are good enough to support our monetary policy, to support our payments policy, and so on and so forth. So you and I, why would we even want to start a bank? Why would we even want to be part of the entrenched infrastructure, other than, to share in the fruits of this circle of the system that is milking every transaction in the country. So if we're not creating a bank, then what would we create if you and I were to start something in the financial services industry today?
Oh gosh. Anything that doesn't seem like a financial service at all. I think that I think it's useful to kind of look at culture in a certain way, particularly internet culture and the way people interact on there. If for no other reason, it's a generational shift, right? The people, most people younger than you and I would say, are more internet native, although I think you and I are pretty savvy with respect to that, given our backgrounds. But so I would look at how people are acting there, and that is, I think, a way in which kind of crypto startups have good intuition Like, oh, people want to exchange X, Y, and Z, right? How can we help them facilitate that exchange? Where they kind of completely go off the rail is that they don't necessarily take the world as it is, they take it how they would like it to be. And so they use financial coded language in whatever product or service offering they have. And that automatically kind of trips alarm bells and raises their legal risk profile. Now, I'm not saying that by just using the right words and magic incantations, you can avoid kind of legal risk, but you can do yourself a favor by not, for example, calling yourself a bank, right?
Yeah.
No, we're not doing that. We're a community, whatever, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that there is an opportunity to perhaps recreate some of the kind of traditional value exchange or value sharing um, organizations is maybe too strong of a word, but ways that human beings had done things in the past with respect to sharing resources that really kind of existed on a very hyper local level or at a like a tribal level, because now we finally kind of have the tools where distance matters far less than it ever did, especially online, right? And so, you know, you can have a very micro targeted um, you know, resource pooling service that just wasn't even possible a decade ago or more, you know. So I would want to create something around there. You know, unfortunately, most of those kind of like use cases are related to games and you know, other media and kind of cultural consumption. And although I think that's important, that's not where my personal interests necessarily lie. And I don't think we'll see kind of like the structural changes that impact kind of how society is organized until much later.
Well, another new kid on the block today is artificial intelligence, AI, and we can't be talking about cryptocurrency without talking about AI because I guess it's the thing, right? So if you're in cryptocurrency, then you should also try being in AI a little bit. And I'm half skeptical, but there is some truth to this. Both are at the very external edge of thought and technology, both crypto and AI. And I think that some people, simply by their nature or by the way they were brought up, are constantly live or search for such edges. They just have to be there because they are obsessed with the future and the present sucks so much that they can't help. Yes, they can't help probing whatever is the cutting edge today. So nothing wrong with that. So thinking about artificial intelligence and AI, and having just finished talking about the financial system, do you think that AI will make a dent in the financial system? Do you think that AI will do to cryptocurrency what many cryptocurrency enthusiasts, human as they are, failed to do?
Hmm. So are you asking, will AI kind of be able to pick up the torch and actually get the job done?
Yes.
That's an interesting idea. You know, with respect to crypto and AI, I've thought for a while now that DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, um, that the really interesting potential use case for DAOs may be allowing human beings and AI bots on the internet to interact in ways that they couldn't otherwise, right? So if you think of a DAO as a kind of pseudo corporate entity that exists online and has a rule set governing the interactions and powers that participants in the DAO have, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's fertile ground for an artificial intelligence bot to know, okay, well, these are the rules for this game, and it has these resources associated with it. So if I want to interact with this DAO, this is what I can do. This is what I can't do, right? Human beings get much more creative, kind of because they're, you know, not constrained by the rule set. Let's say some people think they're constrained by the rule set. Other people realize they're not. But I do think that AI will maybe kind of accelerate the financial aspect of crypto, because it's just going to become so easy for people to automate kind of profitable trading strategies, let's say. And I've always thought the kind of financial aspect of crypto is one of the least interesting, right? I'm much more interested in what it enables and how people can interact in ways that they couldn't interact before. And I don't think that AI will necessarily change that. So, you know, it would be kind of a funny consequence of AI developing, and then for whatever reason, a bunch of AI projects start to rely upon crypto, and then the value of crypto goes up as a consequence. I mean, I suppose it's possible. I am always looking towards the future, and I can think of a couple of different sci-fi stories that are in the neighborhood of that scenario. But you know, will it decimate kind of the traditional financial system? No. Will it decimate kind of back end bookkeeping and everything, and maybe a lot of jobs that are not public facing? Yes, I definitely think that's happening already, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting. It would be funny if crypto just starts going way up and the human beings have no idea why and nobody can explain.
Yeah, let me probe this a little bit and see if I got it right. This is very interesting.
Sure.
I've always thought that in the war between innovation and the entrenched financial system, the weakest link on the side of the innovation was always the humans, someone, a person, right? It was never the quality of software. It was never the technology. It was never the ideas. It was always people. And there are two ways in which people are the weakest link in crypto. The first and the most obvious one is just people tend to be fraudsters, thieves, liars, and all other sorts of bad characters. So, and it's people who apply crypto in accordance with their human nature. And we end up with criminals, we end up with thieves, we end up with fraudsters, we end up with scams, and people go to jail for a good reason. People don't go to jail when they should, right? And crypto in general gets a bad rep. So the second aspect of humans being the weak link is that governments are not always benevolent or competent, and they sometimes use regulation to entrench the entrenched even more, or to advance special interests, or to facilitate something that is not good for the progress, right? So no one's perfect, fine. And then it's the person behind the project that will be the weakest link. You arrest the person, the project is dead. You charge the person, the project is dead. You segregate the person financially, the project is dead. You close his bank accounts, the project is dead, right? So I don't think that any technology, consumer level technology, has been attacked by government regulation to the same extent that crypto has been attacked. Now, if artificial intelligence replaces the human link, we kill two birds with one stone. Assuming that artificial intelligence is programmed ethically and responsibly,
Mhm.
which is a big assumption. And also knowing that artificial intelligence is immune to government regulation. Technologies cannot be regulated. Only people can be regulated. Then do you think that that will result in an explosion of innovation in the financial system? Because it will simply grow from the grassroots, where where once media and established newspapers ruled their industry. Now we have citizen journalism and whatnot, with, of course, a lot of criticism of that, but the landscape has completely changed in that department from the grassroots, regardless of any regulation, so on and so forth, just because technology was mixed with human intent. Do you think AI will immunize cryptocurrency from scams and regulation on both sides, and that will result in an explosion of cryptocurrency and progress in the financial sphere?
If somebody can find a way to make money off of it, maybe. If only because, I kind of, it's an interesting idea, and but it's not apparent to me exactly how it would happen, even at like a genesis level, right? Because it's like, who's going to be motivated to build some of these solutions, right? And I think, given the interest still in the crypto markets, and of course the interest in kind of like AI solutions, what you have described, I would say, is more akin to kind of like public utility type plays that are, maybe they're consumer level, but it's not let's get rich quick. And I think it's something that is definitely possible, and may come to fruition eventually. But I'm just not even sure what that would look like. It's almost like, kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're describing somewhat services like Plaid or something, right? That provides this like financial interconnection between institutions, whether it's a startup that's using Plaid to connect to your bank or something like that. And nobody really even knows, outside of people that pay attention or work in that industry, that Plaid even exists. Does that make sense? Kind of what I'm trying to, because if you're trying to eliminate the human scam element, right, then AI needs to be more in control. And the question is, what exactly is it going to be in control of? And so, and this is not even getting to, well, how do we program it in an ethical way? Personally, I think that is a fool's errand. I think maybe a better framing, at least the way I think of kind of like when clients are trying to do something, is kind of, well, let's assume that it's going to break. And how do we work from that assumption, right? How do we get to a level of comfort where, well, we know, at least right now, these are kind of like the 3 problem areas, but we've minimized from a, problem area set of 7 down to 3. So like, it's that concept of minimizing the attack surface that's sometimes talked about with respect to blockchain networks. I think Nick Szabo was the one who came up with that. And, I think if you take that approach, you have discrete problems and you deploy AI solutions, and yeah, definitely. But again, how is somebody going to make money? These are not necessarily altruistic endeavors. I think part of what made the internet successful is that a lot of the initial infrastructure level innovation was in part funded in terms of actual like time and sweat and money from academic institutions, right? It was researchers, right, who didn't have the same motivations. It was much more public private innovation, whereas like the crypto space has been solely private, at least up to this point. And so then you throw in something like AI, which, so it's just funny to talk about AI because it's so old. Number one,
Mhm.
I mean, Turing was thinking about AI, and now we finally have kind of like enough data and tooling and compute power to actually realize like a lot of these really old dreams. And so that similarly though, how are you going to create services that eliminate scams? Like how would you pitch that? I don't even know what it would be. I mean, we service a similar client base and they all, want to, they have different ways of making money. Let's put it that way.
Do you think lawyers foster innovation or stifle innovation?
Generally stifle. I think that they can foster it, but that requires lawyers to really lean into more being a counselor and a trusted advisor. I
Well,
tell clients that all the time. It's like, hey, this is your money. These are your resources. You can spend it how you see fit. But I think this could be a problem.
well, this sounds like a good segue into part two because we hit our time limit, and I don't
Yeah.
really want to end on this note. Lawyers stifle innovation, although I completely agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And I don't think that it is inherent to lawyers to do that. I think that it's really on a lawyer by lawyer basis, and but generally, yes. Look at the law practice itself, how innovative it is, right? And how
Right, right.
technologically advanced it is. Look at how lawyers do their own business. But I think that lawyers can contribute to the conversation, and in that respect, your idea about DAOs being fueled by artificial intelligence, if I understood you correctly, this was really what you were talking about, where decentralized autonomous organizations become autonomous not only from uh, regulators or from corporate boards or something like that, but they become autonomous truly from humans. And consumers will choose AI-driven financial services organizations to do business with based on their reputation and based on what we know about this particular AI and how it operates. I think even now, generative AIs, different generative AIs already have developed certain reputation among
Yeah.
consumers. Chat GPT has reputation of being maybe too conservative on some things, and also its reputation has changed over the even just mere months, right? So don't you
Right.
think that in that respect, consumers have a shot at um, finding and sticking with a reliable, artificially intelligent financial system? And maybe we will even have parallel financial systems that will compete with each other. And scammers or governments will not be able to do anything about it. Just like today, it's too late. The government can hardly do anything about email, for example. That's it. What
Right.
can the government do about email? I mean, other than the brute force at the last mile.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's definitely possible. And I think that, the AI as advisor in whatever domain is where we'll see the most value initially. When I first started practicing law, I did a lot of work on the use of neural nets in medical imaging to try and improve diagnostic outcomes. And all of the research out there is like, if you have a human doctor and AI analyzed imagery together, it's always better, right? Either one alone is never good enough. And I think in domains that are where there's a judgment element that's dependent upon wisdom, shall we say, that is going to continue to be the case, right? An AI can mimic, Chat GPT can mimic being smart, but it's not going to give you like wisdom on how to live your life, right? Or anything like, or what's the best decision out of, this set of decisions for you, right? And so I do think that, yeah, consumers may be able to, and I could see a future where they sign up for an AI service that's like, will take care of your financial life, connect your Chase Bank, connect your credit cards. Okay, or do you consider yourself a conservative investor, an aggressive investor? We already have robo advising services. This would just take it to the next level, right? And a lot of those annoyances and everything else, like plugging in your credit card at websites if you're purchasing stuff, that service will just do it. I mean, it could be a browser extension that's hooked up to some mainline server. There's a lot of different ways that you could do it, but I could see something like that, right? Where it would cut down drastically the amount of fraud potential. We don't have to remember as much stuff. I just started reading a book called, well, here, I'll show you. And it was talking about this point right at the beginning, A Brief History of Artificial Intelligence by this professor, Michael Wooldridge. But he was saying, like, there's three things, and it's directly relevant to this. He's like, I want you to know that computers are very fast. And he's talking about how they can perform 100 billion instructions every second, right? And how that's just markedly different. They can follow simple instructions. They don't actually really make mistakes all that much. The people programming them do. And so those sorts of combinations, I mean, you're right. I think that our financial lives, like, could be greatly improved by leveraging those benefits, right? Minimizing mistakes, speed. Yeah. But you need to, it kind of reminds me of those services, if this, then that, where if you built an if this, then that AI financial service, actually, that's the company we should start right now, is an if this, then that AI financial service, right? Yeah, you could probably print money doing that.
Well, I think this is a much better note to conclude our conversation. So we can at least show that at least some lawyers foster innovation. At least these two, hopefully.
We're trying.
Anyway, yeah, we're trying. We're doing our best, people. I want to thank you, Nelson. This has been really fun. It's almost like chatting in a coffee shop or something like that, except we're across two lakes from each other. And yeah, I hope to visit Chicago. I know you're never going to come to Toronto because people always say I will come to Toronto, but they hardly ever do. But I definitely have been to Chicago several times. I drove through Chicago on the way to your other home state of Minnesota. I made that trek, yeah, from Toronto to Minnesota by car. So Chicago is the midpoint, and that's where I spend the night. So yeah, the connections are there. Anyway, thank you so much for this wonderful chat, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Plot. This is great. Look forward to doing it again.